James got his first credit card in 2019. He was 26. New job, first apartment for the first time in a long time. Things actually felt like they were coming together. The limit was $2,000, the interest rate was 24%. He was careful, small purchases here and there. A grocery run when things got tight at the end of the month. A laptop repair he couldn't keep putting off. Every month, he made the minimum payment, never missed one, set up autopay. Felt like he had it handled. 5 years later, by 2024, he had paid back roughly $3,000. And he still owed more than he originally borrowed. Not because he was irresponsible, not because he made bad decisions. Because of the exact same force that every finance book promises will make you rich. Compound interest. You've heard about it your whole life, the eighth wonder of the world. A quote supposedly from Einstein, though nobody's ever actually confirmed that. But here's what nobody tells you, there's a second half to that sentence. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world for the person who collects it. And that brings us to the question almost no one thinks to ask. Which one are you? Are you collecting? Or are you the one paying? Because right now, today, without doing a single thing wrong, without missing a payment, without making one reckless decision, you could be on the losing side of the most powerful financial force that exists. And the worst part, it's built to feel completely fine. Compound interest has two sides. Most financial content only ever shows you one. This video shows you both. By the end, you'll understand exactly how the same mechanism builds wealth for some people and quietly drains it from others. You'll see the real numbers, the actual math, and the psychological trap that keeps millions of people paying compound interest for decades, while genuinely believing they're getting ahead. You'll also walk away with a straightforward way to figure out which side you're on, and what to do if you're on the wrong one. But before we get to the math, I want to show you something about how this force actually plays out in real life, something that will change the way you look at every financial product you're ever offered. Stay with me, the most important part of this video isn't the formula, this comes first. If we haven't met, I'm Maya. I'm not a financial advisor. What I do is look at the gap between what financial content tells you and what actually ends up happening to your money. I pay attention to the psychology behind decisions, to the structural forces most people don't notice until they're already feeling the effects. I used to think compound interest was straightforward. I understood the concept. I knew the formula. I'd seen the charts. What I didn't realize was that I was living on both sides of it at the same time. And one side was quietly doing a lot more damage than the other. For years, I felt good about where I stood financially. I was investing. My account balance was climbing. I was doing the right things. What I wasn't doing was paying the same attention to the other side of the ledger. When I finally did, I saw exactly what I'd been missing. That's what this video is really about. Not the version of compound interest that makes you feel good about starting early. The version that explains why so many people spend decades doing everything right and still feel like they're barely moving. Before we go further, I want you to hold one question in the back of your mind. You've probably seen the compound interest chart. The one where $100 a month turns into hundreds of thousands over 30 years. It's in every personal finance book, every investment app, every conversation about why your 20s matter so much. That chart is real. The math checks out, the growth is genuine. But here's what I want you to sit with. What if at the very moment that chart is working for you, a mirror version of it is working against you? Same curve, same exponential shape, same relentless, self-feeding growth. Just pointed in the opposite direction. And what if the reason most people never see that second chart is simple? The people profiting from the first one have no reason to show it to you? I'm not going to give you the answer just yet. I want you to carry that question with you as we go through this. Because when you see both curves side by side, you'll already understand why most people never see the second one coming. Including James, making his minimum payment every month for 5 years, never realizing a thing. Let's start with what compound interest actually is. Not the definition, the mechanism. Simple interest, you borrow $100 at 10% every year. You pay $10. That's it, the amount never changes because the interest only ever applies to the original balance. Year 1, $10, year 10, still $10. Compound interest, you borrow the same $100 at the same 10% first year. You owe $10 in interest. But if you don't pay it off, that interest gets folded into your balance. Now you owe $110. Next year, the 10% applies to 110, not 100, that's $11. Now you owe 121. The year after that, 10% of 121, and it keeps going. Interest starts earning interest, the growth feeds itself. Every cycle builds on a slightly larger base than the one before. That's the mechanism, and it runs with the same cold precision in both directions. On the investment side, your returns get reinvested, and those returns generate more returns. A single dollar at 7% doubles in 10 years, quadruples in 20, grows eightfold in 30. It moves slowly at first, then starts to accelerate in ways that feel almost hard to believe. On the debt side, interest gets added to your balance, and that new balance starts generating even more interest. Same curve, same shape, same relentless compounding, just running the other way. Same mechanism, same math. The only difference is the direction the money is flowing, and that one difference, stretched across years, produces outcomes so far apart that most people can't accept they came from the same source. Here's what compound interest working against you actually looks like. Not in theory, with real numbers, real people. The average credit card interest rate in the United States is currently above 20%. Sit with that for a second, 20%. At 20% compound interest, a balance roughly doubles every 3.5 years. Let's make that concrete. This is Marcus. Marcus is 31. He's carrying $4,000 in credit card debt. It didn't happen all at once, a few tight months, some expenses he couldn't predict. Nothing dramatic, just life. Every month, he makes a minimum payment, about 2% of his balance, or the sub-minimum, whichever is higher. That's what most people do. It's automatic, the account stays in good standing, no late fees, no penalties. It feels responsible. In a narrow sense, it is. He's meeting his obligation every single time. But here's what that minimum payment is actually doing. At 20% interest, paying only the minimum, it will take Marcus approximately 22 years to clear that $4,000 balance. 22 years. And over that time, he'll make more than $9,000 in total payments. For a debt that started at $4,000, more than $5,000 of that is pure interest. He borrowed $4,000. He'll end up paying back more than twice that, not because he missed payments, not because anything went wrong, but because the compound curve had 22 years to run. Now, let's look at the other side. Meet Elena. Elena is also 31, no credit card debt. Instead, she takes that same $4,000, the exact amount Marcus borrowed, and puts it into index funds averaging 7% a year. She doesn't touch it, doesn't add to it, just leaves it alone. 22 years later, that $4,000 has grown to roughly $18,000. Same starting amount, same time horizon, same compounding mechanism. Marcus paid $9,000 to erase a $4,000 debt. Elena turned $4,000 into $18,000. The gap between those two outcomes has nothing to do with income, intelligence, discipline, or access to anything special. It's purely, entirely, mathematically about which side of the compound curve each of them was on. Neither of them did anything extreme. Marcus kept up with payments on a balance he thought was manageable. Elena invested a modest amount she didn't think much about. That's the whole story. And the reason Marcus's situation probably feels at least a little familiar, the reason it doesn't read like someone else's problem, is that the minimum payment system isn't a trap a few unlucky people fall into. It's the default. Now I want to get to the part most financial content skips over entirely. And honestly, I think it's the most important part of this whole video. Why do so many smart, financially aware people who know exactly how compound interest works, still carry high interest debt for years? It's not ignorance. Marcus understood compound interest, he'd seen the charts, he knew the concept. The real answer is a specific, well-documented psychological bias, one that the entire consumer finance system is quietly built on. It's called present bias. Our brains aren't wired to treat future costs and benefits the same as present ones. A payment you need to make today feels immediate, real, tangible. A balance that will double in 3.5 years feels distant, abstract, somehow less real than the number sitting right there on your screen. This isn't a personal failing. It's a feature of how the human brain evolved. In environments where tomorrow was genuinely uncertain, prioritizing the present made sense. But in a modern financial system designed around long-term compound growth, that same instinct becomes a liability. And every major consumer financial product has been engineered with that liability in mind. Minimum payments exist because of present bias. Think about the design. The minimum is calibrated to feel manageable, small enough to feel like you're being responsible, comfortable enough that you never stop to question it. But the system is precisely tuned to keep you in compound interest territory for as long as possible. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a business model. Legal, enormously profitable, and built on one insight: if every individual payment feels reasonable, people will pay staggering amounts over a very long time without ever quite noticing. The credit card company collects compound interest, you pay it. And the minimum payment system makes the whole arrangement feel like just another monthly bill. Marcus didn't fail to understand compound interest. He understood it perfectly. On the investment side, that was the only side he'd ever been shown. What he never saw was that the minimum payment had quietly reshaped his financial trajectory, along a dimension that never shows up in the charts. He knew compound interest built wealth. He just didn't realize it was already running in reverse silently for 22 years. I wish someone had shown me this years ago. Let me walk you through it now. At any point in your financial life, the compound curves are running at the same time. Curve A is your assets, everything generating a return: savings accounts, investment portfolios, retirement funds, everything working for you. This curve bends upward over time. Curve B is your liabilities, every debt balance where interest is accruing: credit cards, personal loans, high-interest auto loans, every balance being charged and compounded. This curve also bends upward over time. The question isn't whether compound interest is working for you in some form, it probably is. And the question isn't even whether you have debt, most people do. The real question is, which curve is steeper? If curve B, the rate at which your liabilities are growing, is moving faster than curve A, the rate at which your assets are growing, then compound interest is working against you on a net basis, not in one account overall. No matter how good your investment portfolio looks when you view it on its own, almost no one runs this calculation, not because it's complicated, because it requires putting both curves on the same page. And most financial tools, most financial conversations, most financial content are built to show you only one curve at a time. Your investment app shows you curve A, your credit card statement shows you curve B. Nobody puts them on the same chart and asks, which one is winning? Here's how to do it yourself. Take your highest interest debt balance. Use a free debt payoff calculator and figure out what your total payments and remaining balance will look like in 10 years if you keep making minimum payments. That's your curve B projection, write it down. Then take your current investment assets and calculate where they'll land in 10 years. At a reasonable expected return, 7% is a widely used benchmark. That's your curve A projection. Write that down too. Now look at both numbers at the same time. If curve B is outpacing curve A, if the interest you're paying is compounding faster than the returns you're earning, then you're on the wrong side of compound interest. Net it overall. And no amount of investment optimization will close that gap as efficiently as directly addressing the rate difference. This single exercise changes how most people think about their next financial move, because it makes visible something that almost always stays hidden: the true cost of carrying high-interest debt while investing at a lower return rate simultaneously. Here are 3 moves for shifting that balance, done in order. They'll outperform almost any other approach. Move 1. Find out how fast curve B is actually moving. For every debt you're carrying, what interest rate are you paying, not the monthly payment amount, the annual percentage rate. List every balance and every rate in one place. Most people have a rough sense of what their mortgage costs. Far fewer know their credit card APR off the top of their head, and almost no one has ever put all their debt interest rates next to their investment return rates and asked which number is bigger. This takes about 30 minutes. It might be the most important financial calculation most people never get around to making. Move 2. Compare the curves directly. If your credit card is charging 20% and your investments are returning 7%, you're losing 13 percentage points on every dollar that sits as debt, instead of getting paid off, guaranteed, every year. No market volatility, no uncertainty. Paying off 20% debt is a 20% guarantee return. That beats a 7% portfolio by 13 points with absolute certainty. Most people don't naturally think of paying off debt as an investment return, but that's exactly what it is. And at high interest rates, it's often the best guaranteed return on the table. Move 3. Redirect what's freed up. Once the high interest debt is gone, the money that was feeding Curve B is now available to build Curve A. The same compounding force that was working against you begins working for you. Identical mechanism, opposite direction. That's the crossover point. The people who build lasting wealth aren't always the biggest earners or the most aggressive investors. They're the ones who identified that crossover point and pushed through it. This is layer 3. Layer 1 showed you how inflation quietly erodes everything you build, a slow, invisible loss of purchasing power happening in the background while your balance looks just fine. Layer 2 showed you how to protect your assets if the institution holding them fails, FDIC limits, ownership categories, the structure that kept Daniel's $800,000 fully covered. Layer 3 is different. What's happening here doesn't require a bank failure or an inflation spike to hurt you. Compound interest is already running. It's been running since the first time you carried a balance or opened an investment account. No crisis required, it doesn't send a signal. It just compounds in whatever direction the math is pointing. You met Daniel in the last video. He protected $800,000 in a single afternoon by understanding how the system worked and applying it. But Daniel also understood compound interest, both curves. He knew exactly how fast his debt was growing. He knew exactly how fast his assets were growing. And years before it became urgent, he made sure Curve A was clearly steeper than Curve B. Not because he had some unusual advantage, because he'd done the crossover analysis. Because someone had shown him both curves on the same page. And he'd acted on what he saw. Inflation erodes purchasing power. That's layer 1, smart structure protects what you built. That's layer 2. But if compound interest is running against you faster than inflation, is wearing down your purchasing power, if Curve B is outpacing Curve A, while you're simultaneously trying to shield your assets from institutional risk, you're defending a position that's already losing ground. That's why this is layer 3, not because it's harder to understand, because it's already in motion right now, in the background. On a curve most people never think to look at. Before this video ends, here's what I want you to actually do. Step 1 today. Right now, open a blank note on your phone and write down the annual percentage rate on every debt you carry. Not the monthly payment, the APR, every credit card, every personal loan, every auto loan. All of it. That list is your Curve B. You can't manage what you haven't measured. Step 2 this week, run both projections. Use a free debt payoff calculator to see where your highest interest balance ends up in 10 years on minimum payments. Use a compound interest calculator to see where your current investments end up in 10 years at expected return. Put both numbers on the same page. Look at them together, ask yourself which curve is steeper. Step 3 within the next 30 days. Settle on your transition strategy. Which debt, cleared first, would most dramatically shift the balance between your two curves? That's your highest leverage move. Not the biggest balance, the highest rate. Because compound interest doesn't care how large the balance is, it only cares about the rate. One list, two curves, one clear move. That's the whole analysis, and once you've done it, once you've seen both curves on the same page, you won't look at a minimum payment and investment return, or a debt interest rate the same way again. Because the curve is already in motion, you just need to know which direction it's heading. Here's what I want to leave you with. For most of my adult life, I thought I understood compound interest because I understood the investment side. I'd seen the charts, I knew the math. I genuinely believed in what long-term compounding could do. What I wasn't doing was applying that same thinking to the other side of my balance sheet. When I finally put both curves on the same page, when I saw Curve A and Curve B together for the first time, I found something I wasn't expecting. For years, Curve B had been outpacing Curve A. While I was watching my investments grow, another curve was moving faster in the opposite direction. I felt good about the number in my investment account. I just never stopped to ask what was happening on the other side of the ledger. My wealth was building, just not as fast as I thought. I was moving forward. But one track was significantly longer than the other. That moment didn't feel good. But it turned out to be the most useful financial insight I'd ever had. Because it was specific, it was measurable, and unlike a lot of financial problems, it had a direct, actionable solution. You're not someone who only looks at one curve. You came here. You watched this. You now understand something most personal finance content will never bother to show you. Compound interest isn't inherently your ally. It's a mechanism, the most powerful financial mechanism most of us will ever encounter. And which side of it you're on isn't fixed, it's not determined by your income, your background, your past decisions, or where you're starting from. It comes down to whether you do the crossover analysis. You're someone who looks at both curves, someone who understands what the transition point actually means, someone who sees that the gap between Marcus and Elena wasn't about luck, talent, or opportunity. This was a briefing. You now have everything you need to check your own numbers. Do it today, not this week, today. Because the curve is already moving. The only question that actually matters is which direction it's moving for you right now. Now you know how to find out. This is layer 3. And the series keeps going. Layer 4 takes you somewhere most people never think to look, until they realize the financial foundation they've been building on isn't as solid as they assumed. The next video is already on the channel, go watch it.